This episode of the Just John podcast is brought to you by the fact that it is illegal to swear in front of a dead person in Utah. What up, homies? I'm John Medina, and this, my fine ladies and gentlemen, is the Just John podcast, episode 19.
Allow myself to introduce myself.
On this episode, I'm going to talk about recycling electronics, Facebook having hoaxes, and 2015 in review, and much more.
I guess you could say things are getting pretty serious.
With the holidays just passing, everybody, I'm sure, got a ton of new electronics. So you got a new phone or iPad or tablet or computer or whatever. And with your old ones, you can either sell them, give them away, donate them, or if none of those options are viable, say it's broken or it's just really, really old and no one's really going to get much use out of it, you wonder what to do with it. Most people don't want to just throw it in the trash because they know it's bad for the environment, so they want to recycle it. But the thing about recycling is that it really just irritates me because you want to do something good, you want to help the environment, so you want to take it to be recycled. You can take your plastic, your glassware, your cans, whatever, aluminum, metal, you can take it and you can recycle it for free. Sometimes they'll even pay you to recycle it with things like metal and stuff like that. But the thing about electronics is most places charge you to recycle it. And they do make money off of it. If they try to tell you that they don't make any money off of it, well, they're just lying to you. Now, whether it's to cover the cost or they just want to try to gouge you, it really irritates me that they do not do it for free. I mean, okay, look, there's plenty of different companies, tech companies, that could do it for free just as a good PR move, right? So like Google or Facebook or whoever could say, we care about the environment. We know there's a bunch of old electronics out there. So we've started this recycling program where you can take your stuff to X drop-off and recycle it for free, instead of having to pay for it. I mean, I have a ton of old electronics that are just sitting in my house because I'm not going to go pay someone to recycle stuff that they're going to make money from. Like, I don't understand the logic in it at all. It just seems like a big gimmick to me, to be honest. As I said, I don't understand the point of saying, okay, we're going to let you give us your stuff. We're going to tear it apart, take the gold out of it, and take the other rare materials that are in it that are worth money, and we're going to go turn around and sell them. We're going to take everything else, we're going to melt it down, and we're going to sell it to a company that's going to make playground chips out of it, or we are the company that makes playground chips out of it, and then we're going to turn around and sell that for even more money to schools and parks and all that kind of stuff. But before we do all of that with your stuff that you're giving us, we're going to make you pay us for it. That's not how the economy works, is it? Typically, when I take my old clothes to, well, here it's called the handy shop, but like a Goodwill or wherever, just to donate the clothes, they don't say, okay, hold on, you're donating these clothes for people. We're going to make a little bit of money out of it, maybe enough to stay running, but we're going to sell it for a low price. But before we do that, we're going to make you pay us money for it. How ridiculous does that sound? Do you think people would continue donating their clothes and shoes and old kitchen appliances and all that stuff to these places if they had the same theory that recycling electronics have? I take my cans and some of my plastic stuff and whatever to a place and drop it off for free, and they recycle it or do what they can with it. I don't understand why the electronics recycling is so much different.
You know, when I see a car like this, first thing I do is I say, would you look at this?
Bad news for people with a driver's license, at least here in Missouri and a few other states. So Missouri IDs no longer are valid with federal institutions effective January 10th. So that means if you want to go into a federal building and you need a form of ID, a Missouri driver's license is not going to be acceptable. You'll have to have a passport or some other kind of ID. This also means that it may not work with airports eventually. Now, the federal government has said that if they update the law to where Missouri IDs will not work in airports, they will give you 120 days notice in advance. I'm not sure that 120 days is enough time to get a passport or not. Excuse me, sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, so my voice is kind of getting ridiculous over here. Anyways, back to what I was saying. So I'm not sure if 120 days is enough time to get a passport or not. So if you live in Missouri and they make that law for the plane, even with the 120 days in advance, you may still end up having to push your flight back until you can get a passport. Illinois is in the same boat. They are going to their IDs will no longer be valid effective January 10th. And this is for not adhering to the 2005 Real ID Act, which essentially just sets some guidelines for how the states need to determine how they give people an ID, make sure that they're citizens, blah, blah, blah. It was made a little stricter after the 9/11 attacks, and so I guess some states haven't been adhering to it correctly, but that's because state lawmakers are concerned that it amounts to an invasion of privacy and a backdoor attempt to create a standardized national ID, and some states actually have laws prohibiting them from complying with a national ID card, and these states include Missouri and Minnesota. A couple other states that are going to be under the same effect January 10th are Minnesota, New Mexico, and Washington. And the feds are actually deciding whether or not to grant compliance exemptions to Alaska, California, New Jersey, and South Carolina, which would run until October 16th. All of the states were supposed to comply with the Real ID Act by the end of 2009, but they kept giving extensions, and I guess they're tired of it. I'm not sure what the big deal is with the Real ID Act. I know that to get a driver's license where I live, you have to present your social security card and your birth certificate. And I mean, a social security card is technically federal ID, right? You get it from the federal government. Sure, there's people that you can buy a social security number from, I guess, and whatever, but it may not look like the actual federal social security card. Plus, you have to have a birth certificate. With those two items combined, I'm not sure what more they can do to issue you a driver's license. Whether they want like a hair sample in your firstborn child or something just to get a driver's license, or a state ID. It doesn't even have to be a driver's license. It could just be a non-driver's license, just an ID essentially, but it doesn't say that you can drive a motor vehicle. Either way, I'm not quite sure what the federal government really wants out of this law.
It's weird.
Facebook hoaxes. We see them all the time. We see it say, like for this, share for that, or whatever. But this week we had a really big one. So a few weeks ago, Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan, I hope I'm saying her name right. You know how I am with names. And I've only ever read her name. I haven't even heard her name spoken by anybody. So Priscilla Chan is what I'm going with. Committed to giving 99% of Facebook stock, which is currently worth $45 billion, to charity in honor of their newly born baby daughter, Max. They planned on giving it to the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, which is a charity, but it's not a not-for-profit corporation. And I kind of understand the purpose of using this. A lot of people said that they were doing it to avoid taxes. But the truth is, it's going to be an LLC, so it's going to be a corporation, so it's going to have to pay taxes. Not-for-profit companies don't pay taxes. But I'll tell you the genius in this plan is that this company can go about selling products to consumers like you and me, so they can make something cool like, I don't know, whatever. Then they can use that money to do their charitable stuff. But they don't have to rely solely on people giving them money. Not-for-profits cannot actually operate unless people donate money to them, because they don't do anything to really make a lot of money. And the reason that they don't do anything to make a lot of money is because they walk a fine line between being a regular business and a not-for-profit corporation. So they decided just to do away with that whole not-for-profit. They can make all the money in the world that they want, and then they can use it to do whatever charitable things that they want. Now, understand that as the company does charitable stuff, they give money to other charities or donate it or whatever. That could be used to avoid paying taxes, but a lot of the big companies give a lot of money anyway to avoid taxes. This Facebook post that I saw, it claimed that Zuckerberg was going to give $4.5 million worth of shares to 100 Facebook users if they copy a message as a status and share it and tag 5 to 10 friends. What? Why? Okay, look, I understand that most people that did it just did it because that little nugget of what if. But you're talking about one of the smartest people in the world. If he is going to give away $4.5 million worth of shares, he's not going to just give it away to the random people on Facebook that liked and shared the status. He's going to give it to people that need it and people that are going to make him look good. It would be a huge PR stunt. He would find 100 homeless veterans or 100 poor families around the world or the United States or wherever, and he would publicly give them the money. He would do that because that is publicity and it's good publicity. I'm not saying that the people that shared it on Facebook couldn't use the money or didn't even need the money, because there could have been some of the people that shared it are, borderline on that homelessness or on that really poor level. But he would go about it a much different way than putting it to the billion Facebook users. Picking 100 people out of 1 billion Facebook users and granted, not everybody shared that post. I didn't personally, but out of the people that shared that post, using that 100 of those people, he would have to investigate every single person to find out if they needed it, because Mark Zuckerberg is not going to give $45,000 worth of shares to a person that has a net worth of $450,000. That's not the type of person he is, and that's not the goal for his entire program that he's trying to do. Before I start with my year in review, I'm going to play a song, and it is called Surprise, Surprise, and it is by the Farewell Circuit.
Someone Surprise, surprise. But to my surprise, you changed. In my
If you like that song by the Farewell Circuit, again, it was called Surprise, Surprise. You can check them out on Spotify and iTunes. I'll also have links to their stuff in the show notes, so you can check that out as well.
What year is it?
That's a question that we are be asking ourselves for the next 2 months. Prepare yourself for the constant writing the wrong year on every paper that you mark for at least the next month to 2 months. You're going to see a bunch of 5s that are scribbled into 6s because everyone wrote 2015 instead of 2016. Of course, like every year, 2015 had a ton of things that happened. And when different things happen, what's the first thing that most people do? They Google search it to find out what's going on or more about the person or the thing or whatever. Courtesy of Google's 2015 A Year in Review, I have compiled a list of the 18 most top searched things of 2015. So this first one combines a couple different things together, and that's just because it was a broad category and it happened for a bunch of different people, and they didn't want anybody to feel like they were leaving one out and not including the other. And that was remembering legends that were lost in 2015. So this included Leonard Nimoy, Oliver Sacks, and Bess Mayerson. The Oscars was on the most searched list. The dress. Oh, the dress. Do you guys remember this? The picture of that dress that went around that asked if it was black and gold or brown and blue or whatever. And supposedly, like, if you saw different shades of colors, that's how it determined what you saw and blah, blah. All I'm saying is that was great PR because those people got super famous and, like, sold, like, way more of those dresses than they ever would have sold if they hadn't made that photo go viral. Also on the list was the Cricket World Cup, the Nepal earthquake, the FIFA scandal, which... Man, was that something else. The Women's World Cup. I think that's really cool that that's on there because I just like that it was that it was a big enough deal that it had an impact on being one of the most searched things in 2015. The Greek economy collapse, the China stock market crash, which I think it's kind of funny that those are right next to each other on the list. It's not funny, but it's kind of funny. The Iran nuclear agreement, Cecil the Lion. It blows my mind that this was something that was able to achieve one of the most searched things of 2015. All I'm saying about that. The migrant crisis, which I think is probably still a heavily Googled thing, just because personally, well, at least here in the United States, and my state specifically, there's a lot of turmoil going on and people arguing over whether we should let them come here and things like that. And so I think that's going to be something that people are Googling a lot more over the course of the next year to 2 years. Queen Elizabeth was on the list. She recently achieved the longest reigning queen. Shout out to her because she's like super old, but she's still kicking it. So that's good. The Rugby World Cup was on there. Now, I find it interesting that no American sports were on there. Not to say that our sports are bad. Okay, well, we do play soccer, but soccer is not an American sport. It's just we don't dominate in soccer. Sometimes we do, I guess, but I don't qualify it as an American sport because it didn't really start and thrive in America. Just like I don't consider hockey an American sport either. Yes, we play hockey. We have hockey teams. My state has a hockey team, actually, but I just don't qualify it as an American sport. Anyway, so there was no basketball, no football, no baseball. The Super Bowl was not even one of the most searched things. I'm not saying the Super Bowl in general would be searched, but people were mad searching for those Super Bowl commercials. I just think it's kind of surprising that no American sports were on there, and Google isn't even the biggest search engine in a couple foreign countries. So it's kind of interesting because they still Googled soccer, FIFA, Women's World Cup, or rugby more than we searched any of the American sports. Next on the list is Volkswagen with their emissions scandal. The last thing I heard about that is that they're working on the method to fix everything and how they're going to do all the recalls. I don't think that it'll bankrupt the company, but I think they're going to have a lot of restructuring going on. Water on Mars was a huge thing. Everybody was Googling that to read up on theories, most of which were probably conspiracy theories, but to read up on theories nonetheless. I think that it's really cool that something like that is on the top list just because it shows that as we progress as a society, we are getting much more tolerant of accepting the fact that there may be life out there other than ours. And that doesn't even mean advanced life. It could just mean bacteria or single-celled organisms, but it's life nonetheless. And as a society, we're more open to accepting that now than we ever have been before. 200 years ago, if someone would have said to the general public that water had been found on Mars, which means there's a potential for life on Mars, there would have been mass hysteria. People would have been freaking out. But now we've gotten to the understanding that, yeah, it's possible, and everybody's kind of cool with it. Actually, I think a lot of people like it more than they don't like it. And of course, it could not be 2015 without Star Wars being one of the most searched items.
The Force will be with you, always.
We all knew. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, Star Wars is probably high on the list all the time, at least in the past few years since Disney bought it. But with the movie coming out, I think that boosted its numbers quite a bit. And the last thing on the list is the Paris attacks. Everybody wanted to check up on people, get emergency numbers for people to put on Twitter, to donate money, to do this, to help in any way they could. And I think that's why it was on the top of the list. People were trying to figure out if there was anything they could do to help. And that's the beauty of humanity, really. I mean, a lot of bad happens in the world, and a lot of help happens in the world too. We look at all the bad and we focus on this person attacked this person, or this person killed this person, or tried to kill this person. And we never focus on what we do to help each other. I mean, this tragedy happened. It was horrible. And immediately the world banded together to provide any help that we could. I mean, even in the city itself, cab drivers stopped charging fares to get people to safety. They said, you don't have to pay us any money. Just tell us where you need to go. We're going to get you there. And the media fails to focus on the beauty of that. But as I've said before, I don't want this to turn into a John versus the media conversation, so I'm just going to keep going forward, but say that go humanity.
Because drugs are bad, okay?
So now I'm going to talk about the 10 weirdest customs seizures in 2015. There were 450 pork meat tamales that were seized inside of the luggage of a passenger that was coming to the States from Mexico. They were seized because of fear of disease. They don't have as strict of animal care, meat care, blah, 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 all that stuff down there. So they didn't want it to create, to start a run of mad cow or anything here in the States. There was a semi-submersible vehicle, so like I guess a half boat, half submarine type thing, that had 16,870 pounds of cocaine in it, seized in the Eastern Pacific. Holy hell, that's a lot of cocaine. This one's great. There were 1,455 pounds of marijuana found that it was in watermelon, and they were trying to smuggle it into the States from Mexico. I mean, that's kind of clever, I guess, just put it in a bunch of watermelon and get it through, but I feel like they're still going to x-ray the watermelon. Another trip from Mexico, there was $1.3 million worth of narcotics hidden inside 2 different cars that were trying to come in. Next on the list, so this guy tried to bring some plants that he bought from, I can't remember where it was. I think it was like Jamaica or something. And no, they were not pot plants. They were some kind of flower or something. But they were seized at customs because they had pests on them, little bugs that we did not have in the United States. So he couldn't bring it over because then we would have a new infestation, possibly. 445 hoverboards with counterfeit trademarks and fake batteries were seized. They were seized because there's been a lot of concern for fires that are being started by hoverboards. Listen, if you're going to buy a hoverboard, they're expensive. Don't go super cheap. I'm a cheap guy. I buy a lot of cheap stuff. But one of the things I know that I've learned over the past about cheap stuff is that typically the cheap stuff is cheap because they made it cheaply. You get what you pay for in a lot of things. And you have to understand that some things you need to not buy the cheapest. You may not need to buy the most expensive with all the bells and whistles, but you also don't want to buy the cheapest thing that you can find just because it may not be made well enough. So with something like a hoverboard, something that could burn your house down, or something that even if you're wearing a helmet and knee pads, elbow pads, whatever, could still hurt you, it's best to do a lot of research and maybe not necessarily go for the cheapest one just because it's not just a little $1 item from the dollar store. It's like something that's really, really can hurt you. And beyond that, even the cheap ones are like $400. So if you're going to pay $400, you might as well pay the $600 or whatever and get the next best one so that you just have that little peace of mind. There was 1,365 pounds of marijuana hidden in the spools of wound cable that was trying to be brought in from Mexico. This next one is crazy. So this guy, he is trying to come in from Mexico, and the Border Patrol agents notice that his shoes are really bulky. So they search his shoes. They find that he hid meth in his insoles, essentially. Like he took the packs of meth and like shaped them into insoles and put them in the bottom of his shoes and just used them as the insoles for his shoes. Kind of clever, I guess, but I honestly, shout out to the Border Patrol agents because I don't know that I would have stopped him just because his shoes looked like they were a little bulky. But I guess that's their job and they're trained to notice different things like that. 2 pounds of cocaine were found in fried fish that was being brought from Jamaica. So they fried the fish, cleared out all the guts and stuff on the inside, and then they stuffed cocaine in it. And they figured, oh, well, we're just going to go ahead and try to bring this in, and no one will notice that there's little baggies of cocaine in it. Well, not little baggies, 2 pounds worth of cocaine. And I don't know, I mean, granted the machines might not have caught it, the humans might not have caught it, but if they put a dog through it, it was going to find it because those dogs aren't trained to, like, okay, yeah, it's food. But those dogs, when they are in drug finding mode, do not respond to food. They respond to drugs and only drugs. But whatever, they're, technology and different things are growing and growing, and so maybe they're trying to find new creative ways to smuggle the drugs in. This one's possibly the most clever because it would be something that you would see in a movie of some sort. So number 10 on my list for the weirdest custom seizures in 2015 was a fake Border Patrol car that had 12 undocumented immigrants. So someone faked a Border Patrol car from paint, style, and everything. The only thing that alerted the authorities to it was the license plate, because, they couldn't fake that the correct way. And maybe the fact that 12 undocumented immigrants were in it, but I feel like if they're going to fake the car, they're going to have a place to hide the people so that they couldn't see them. But anyway, so I thought that was A for effort, I guess. It was real clever, but it didn't work. So gonna have to figure out something better for the next time.
Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't.
Traditionally, I end the show with an app review, but in honor of this being the first episode of 2016 and counting down the year of 2015, I'm going to compile one last list, and this is the top 10 apps of 2015. Now, this was reported by TechCrunch, but it was via Nielsen, the market research company. The top 10 apps were as follows: Facebook, YouTube, Facebook Messenger, Google Search, Google Play, Google Maps, Gmail, Instagram, Apple Music, and Apple Maps. Now, we know why Facebook Messenger is at the top of that list, because Facebook literally forced you to download Facebook Messenger. I'm not sure why Google Play is on the list, because I consider Google Play an app store. I mean, I know at its heart it's technically an app, but if Google Play's on the list, how come the Apple App Store isn't on the list? Or iTunes, for that matter. Are they not considered apps, but Google Play is? Kind of weird on that one. The only reason that I think Apple Maps is on this list is because it became the default map for iPhones. And even for a while, there was a time that you couldn't even download Google Maps at all on the iPhone. But you can now, and that's why it's higher on the list. So here's a few facts that were gathered about this list. Okay, so Facebook continued to hold the number one position as the top app installed on US smartphones. We can gather from that at least last year it was the top one. It's probably been the top one for quite some time. The fastest growing app of the year was Apple Music, which saw a 26% year-over-year climb, which I'm not sure how they calculated that, because Apple Music wasn't out in 2014, was it? I don't know. Whatever. I'm no math genius, so whatever. In terms of top apps by users, Facebook had 126 million average unique users each month, which is 8% increase over last year. YouTube had 97 million average unique users each month, which was up 5% from last year. In terms of battle between the operating systems, the US still favors Android with a 52.6% market share, compared with the 42.7% for iOS. There's probably a margin of error on that, because I don't think they did a census and surveyed everybody with a smartphone. So they didn't announce their margin of error. So the market generic assumption is a plus or minus 5%. Barely 3% of smartphone users owned a Windows Phone device in the past year. 3%. You know what? I wouldn't mind having a Windows Phone if it ran Android. What does that mean? Because all the manufacturers that make Windows phones also make Android phones. I like the new Windows 10 look, and I would be willing to try it out if it ran Android apps. That's all I'm saying. And somehow, some way, BlackBerry still has 0.7% share of the market. I literally have not seen a BlackBerry that wasn't on a computer in probably 3 years. I don't even know anybody that has a BlackBerry anymore. Do you have a BlackBerry? If you do, send me a picture of that cheese, please. Appreciate you. App Annie's data. So App Annie is like, they're an app research company. So they do all these different market research projects on applications and app stores and users and like how many users pay for X app and blah, blah, blah. So they say that apps like WhatsApp, Messenger, and Snapchat are the top apps by download as of last month, so as of November. And a lot of the top grossing apps in the world are video streaming apps. So we're seeing some change in the style that people enjoy. We're seeing people go from, the generic apps, maps, blah, 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 to people going to third-party messaging apps and video apps and different ways to communicate with people. So we're seeing the phone go from, we saw it go in a cycle from a communication tool with calling and then text messaging and email into a entertainment tool with games and maps and YouTube and all that, and back into a communication tool with all of those other apps. So we can video stream, but we can communicate with those video streams. We can message each other on Facebook. We can use WhatsApp. We can use Snapchat. We can use all these different things to still communicate. So I think that next year we may see that list change a little bit. We may see some of the big dogs fall a little and see some of these new communication apps rise up in the list.
Some avocado.
If you enjoyed the show, please show me some love by liking, thumbs up, subscribe, share, rate, review, retweet, or whatever it is that's used to symbolize the love of the show and the platform you're using to view it. You can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyM_Revo. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/JustJohnPodcast. You can find the show at justjohnpodcast.wordpress.com. You can listen to the show at soundcloud.com/justjohn-podcast or youtube.com/JFMedina2010. You can also search for the Just John Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and some other shite. You can email me at justjohnpodcast@gmail.com. And remember, without you, I'm just some dude talking to himself on the internet. Until next time, peace out, fam.